So in today's class, we're going to be talking about the third major sort of modeling that we're covering this semester. Following that, we're going to be going on to discussion of processes that are held in common between the different sorts of modeling techniques. Processes that involve things like sensitivity analysis of a model with respect to parameters, calibration of a model with respect to data, to tune model parameters so they best explain the data, aspects of running the model with different experiments, etc. Today's discussion, we're going to be getting to this area called discrete event modeling. Now, this name is somewhat of a misnomer because we have, within the context of our other sorts of modeling, actually seen discrete events before. So this notion of a discrete event, what this basically means is an instantaneous event occurring at a specific moment in time. So we'll have, for example, in the context of our agent-based modeling, we'll have events that occur at particular precise moments in time, sometimes evenly spaced, sometimes at irregular times. Can anyone give me an example of a type of event that we've seen, and I particularly have in mind our agent-based modeling examples, where events fire off at certain times during the simulation, sometimes anticipated ahead of time, sometimes unanticipated. Give me an example of an event that's triggered, something that happens at a specific time. Anyone? Messages. Great. That's exactly right. So Howe said these could be messages. So this might be arrival of a message associated with, exposed. Someone's exposed to some pathogen, some amount of risk, which carries with it a risk of infection. What's another sort of event that might go off on a more regular basis we've seen? Anyone? Well, we've seen events, for example, that might trigger updating of a histogram. Do you remember that? We have this histograms displayed or updating of a chart, etc. There's some. I think maybe it's just a double monitor over there. If anyone's occupying a space and has a laptop with them, maybe they could use that laptop. Alan, if you could, maybe you don't need to be in front of one. There's a space back there. So if we have a reporting event, an event that reports on something, maybe with a histogram, or maybe with a chart, maybe by outputting some data, as we'll be seeing, that might be a reporting event that goes off. But there's other sorts of events as well. Changing states within a state chart, there's often transitions between them that go off as say, well, what sort of transitions are there between states? When we were looking at agent-based modeling, what were some of the transition types? Anyone? A rate transition. So there you have a certain chance per unit time of transitioning between two states. Great. That transition itself is an event. It fires off at a certain time as determined by a draw from an exponential distribution according to the rate. There's actually a draw from a probability distribution as to when this will fire off. And if another event occurs first out of this state, it'll preempt this one, but otherwise it will fire off at that time. What's another type of transition we had from a state? Anyone? Timeout. Yeah, timeout. That would also fire an event off. So in many ways, what's going on in the context of agent-based modeling is an event-driven process. And in fact, underneath the surface, there is something that is called the scheduler, whose job in life it is to keep track of these events. And you could think of there as being a queue of events. So there's a queue, an event queue, with events ordered by, what do you think? By what determines whether an event goes first? If it's earlier in time? Yeah, if the arrival time of that event is sooner, it'll be scheduled, it'll be earlier in the queue. It's a priority queue, prioritized by timing. The ones that occur earlier in time will be handled first. And really what's going on beneath the covers is that AnyLogic is jumping from event to event here in an agent-based model to handle each event in turn. Now, the situation is made a little bit more textured because some events are only scheduled dynamically. In other words, an agent perhaps goes to a new state at a certain time, and then that schedules a firing of a message event at that time, which gets put into here. But in some cases, the agent maybe there's for example, a rate event here to go from state A to state B, and there's a timeout event from A to C, and that fires before the rate event. Or maybe this is a message event from A to C. And that preempts, that occurs before this event can go to A and B. Because it preempts it, this event, which will take it associated with the transition from A to B, may be descheduled, right? It no longer applies. The agent isn't in state A anymore. They've gone over here because they received a message to state C. And as a result, this transition from A to B, which was going to occur according to some rate, gets wiped away. Does that make sense? Because it's no longer eligible now. It's no longer in A. It's now in C because of this message that got received. As a result, the anticipated transition from A to B is now no longer relevant. So it gets descheduled. So there's actually a very sophisticated event scheduler that goes on beneath the covers as you run an AnyLogic model, particularly an agent-based model. It will actually take care of scheduling and handling, in other words, servicing these events. It takes care of going through, making sure events get placed in the queue appropriately, making sure that when that time comes, the event will be handled. Now, this sort of setup is very attractive because there may be certain times where events come thick and fast. There's a burst of events associated with something going on. And then there may be times where events are very rare, that only, at certain times it's every few seconds, at other times every few days. And we're not forced in this model into the least common denominator. If we need to handle things very quickly to adjudicate different actions going on, we can do so to get the action simulated. On the other hand, if we only have sparse work, occasionally we can jump from time to time to time to handle these later events. So that's going on, and it allows AnyLogic, as well as other discrete event modeling packages, to actually secure quite a bit of performance increase compared to a package which would require them to go in time steps, time chunks, in a discrete time model. That discrete time model, where time is going in discrete steps rather than discrete events, the discrete steps is something seen in a system dynamics model. We have to integrate up over time that model, the stalks and flows of that model, and we do so traditionally by going from step to step to step in the most simple form with fixed length time steps. So maybe there's a model, it has many pieces in it, and we simulate one time step as one day, and it sort of treats each day at a time, anticipates what's going on over time in that day, computes the flows over the course of the next day, updates the stocks according to those flows, and then it's on to the next day in a fixed time way. So that would be discrete event modeling and agent-based modeling, what we called confusingly discrete event simulation and agent-based modeling. They both make use of discrete events. System dynamics traditionally makes use of continuous time, but it goes in discrete steps over time. So it's maybe every one day here. So this would be system dynamics. And in this context, in the system dynamics context, you're kind of forced the least common denominator. If there's something that has to take place, within the time span of minutes, you got to simulate the whole model throughout its entire execution at the span of minutes, which is slow compared to what would otherwise be involved. So here we have two different models, discrete and a discrete event modeling, and we have a system dynamics modeling which makes use of fixed time steps. Okay. The conceptual model here is still continuous time. We think of time as continuous, but it actually gets chunked forward to solve it, to run the model. It's actually going in time steps that are equidistant from each other in its traditional form. There are more sophisticated methods of integrating a system up, Runge-Kutta methods, for example, which involve irregular time steps. But a lot of system dynamics models actually count, not all, not even most, but a significant minority count on fixed time steps. Okay? So the technique we're going to be talking about today is called, historically, and it's an unfortunate thing, it is called discrete event simulation. That's the name given to the whole technique. It uses discrete events and discrete event handling, but so does agent-based modeling. It's really not its distinguishing feature, but that is the historical term used for it, discrete event simulation. Really, it's better named as something like process-centric modeling or network. It's also termed confusingly in AnyLogic network-based modeling because we have a network of movements of agents. And basically, it involves a type of modeling which is kind of asymmetric. We have a certain number of agents, as it were, a certain number of entities, they're traditionally called, of actors that flow through a system, and then lots of resources that act upon them. Okay, so we're going to be going into this today, and as a first step in that, I would like you to actually open up the trauma center model for AnyLogic, okay? So it's in the examples area, and I actually think in this version of AnyLogic, it is in the examples in healthcare, but I think it's actually in the general examples over on the right-hand side. So I'm going to say AnyLogic help here, and we're going to go down and call up this model. Now, in the course of this, we're going to be taking a look at some elements of the model, and then as time allows, we will in fact be simulating or building up a model that has some elements of this, okay? And within this context, we're going to see how these models are built. Oops, I did something, I screwed up here. What I actually wanted to do was to do example models, not help system. Okay, couple of useful pointers if you want to know your way around AnyLogic. It is useful to sometimes use the help system. There is a broad area of it which will provide details on the different methods you can use in this area here, AnyLogic classes and functions. There's also more detailed tutorials. Also, for anyone using AnyLogic, wants to get around, if you have a model open, you can do Control F to find things that mention a certain element in the model, and you can use that to quickly locate certain features of a model. It's very useful. And that, again, is edit, search, and replace. Many of you are Eclipse users and are probably going to be familiar. So within the examples area, if you scroll down, there should be something called Trauma Center here. Do you see it? Trauma Center? Yes? Okay, good. So click on Trauma Center. And we're going to call up this rather articulated, rather involved model that's created using discrete event simulation. And you're going to get some sense of its strengths and perhaps some sense of its weaknesses by taking a look at this model, okay? So within the context of this model, we have what would appear to be many agents: doctors, nurses, physician's assistants, patients, registrars here. And you'll notice that some of them have information associated with them, have parameters associated with them. Take out patient, for example. They have a severity associated with them and something to record the time where they entered the system. Do you see that? Patients? Okay. Now, let's run the model, and then let's go into sort of take a look at how it functions. So I'd like you to right-click there and run this out. You'll notice there's a bunch of assumptions here. And it's going to build it, and it gives to us. Now, there's two modes in which this model can be run. One of them is in 3 dimensions, and one is in 2 dimensions. I'm going to run it in 2 dimensions only. I'm not actually sure what the system in front of you supports as far as 2 and 3 dimensions. I will switch it over here to 2 dimensions. Oh, okay. Okay, you know what? It is not playing nicely with my virtual machine. Maybe that's tech support calling. Okay, so let's call it up here. Is it running on your systems? Okay, so what you should see while it's running is a flow of patients into a facility and a set of activities which are taking place within that facility to bring those individuals to certain locations that are suitable for their situation, their context. And these include bringing them to things like treatment rooms, bringing them to on stretchers in some cases, bringing them for diagnostic imaging like an X-ray or what have you. Now, because of the problems with that system, I'm going to need to have to open it up here on my Linux side, and in Linux land, I will run it, and hopefully we won't have the video incompatibility issues that we did there with Windows. Okay, so running it in 2D or 3D mode, you should see these agents coming in. These are actors. These are so-called entities that are coming into the system, and those entities are then acted upon by a variety of other actors. These other actors include people. They include pieces of equipment like a bed or a wheelchair. They also include things like pieces of like an X-ray machine and so on. So I'm going to go into this, and you'll notice someone just came in via the ambulances, and they're brought to this room and dropped off on this bed. Someone comes and sees them, and then eventually other people are coming in as well. There's an exchange of staff here. People are visiting the different patients, and here, associated with each of these emergency rooms, there's actually going to be statistics accumulated, like how long are they in the emergency, how long are they in a given room, what is the average occupancy of that room, etc. And this, in fact, will track sort of the arrivals by time of day, and it will correspond to sort of the traffic here. I'm running this very quickly. We could slow it down. But what you will generally see is that there's a flow that makes use of resources to treat each of these individuals. Some of these resources are fixed, like rooms. Some are, or X-ray machines. Some are movable, like these beds that are moving around. Some of them have agency, have mobility themselves, things like nurses, doctors, technicians for the X-rays, etc. And you will see that there's these areas here devoted to doctors and nurses, for example, or areas devoted to physicians' assistants. You'll notice these statistics are being accumulated. And And these statistics will help understand, for example, how many walked in, how many have been discharged, and how many arrived via ambulance. Okay. This is a type of modeling that is driven by well-defined, and this is absolutely key, it's driven by well-defined flows as shown within these flow charts. And this is quite a difference from what we saw with agent-based modeling. With agent-based modeling, we had individuals in certain states, and those states might be captured, say, with state charts, one or more of them, and they evolve over time, and they interact with each other. Here, we have a depiction of sort of broad processes in a flow sort of fashion by which individuals, these so-called entities that enter, you can see the arrivals coming here for walk-in, they flow through the system. Those entities are mostly passive. They flow into the system and they flow through it, but they are caught up. They are held back. They are waiting in line in certain areas because of unavailability of resources, okay? And you'll notice that some of the terminology here is suggestive of that. So, for example, it'll say to waiting room, but then it sees registrar. Now, that sounds vaguely transgressive, but it's actually referring to the fact that a person, in order to be checked in, needs to have allocated to them at least one registrar. They then go through a registration process, they go back to the waiting room, and then they continue on here, and they may come down here to sort of be assigned to a room, to have a nurse assigned to them, to be examined within the room, and then to have a technician who might be or a physician's assistant who might, for example, work them up further for imaging or what have you. So this is a map of the process that agents are going through, and you will notice that associated with each of these blocks is a couple of things. One thing is an icon which indicates what sort of action it's associated with. So when a given entity reaches this place to waiting room, they will go to a certain location. By contrast, another thing, this triage process is just a process that takes a certain amount of time. Sees registrar, that's sort of waiting for a resource. And that's indicated by the icon. But what's also indicated here, associated with these numbers here, is the number of agents who are currently in that process, the number of these entities, that's denoted by this number at the top, the number that have come in and the number that have left. So for this one that I'm pointing at, for example, 85 have come in and 78 have left. 88 and 79, 89, 9. And you'll notice that the difference between the two corresponds to the number at the top. How many are in that place right now? So here we have kind of a mapping out of the flow of these individuals throughout this care system. Now, a key component of this is that if a resource is not available, for example, a registrar is busy right now, they have to wait. Or similarly, if they are awaiting, if they have to be assigned to a room, if that room is not available, they will wait for it. They will need to queue up until it is available. So this type of modeling puts a central emphasis not only on flow through a fixed process, but also on availability of resources. Indeed, mark my words, the flow through this process is governed by, is predicated on, is contingent upon, it requires the assignment of resources. If resources are not available, a person will typically wait. Now that waiting won't go on without limits. They can balk. They can say, I'm out of here. You know, I'm leaving. I'm not going to wait this long. But the point is that their progress through this system is contingent on the availability of resources. Now, why would that be, ladies and gentlemen? Why would you want to make the progress through this be contingent on resources? Why not just describe an average amount of time they spend in in a state? Why capture resources? Why muddy the water with resources? Why do we endogenize resources? Make them something that is explicitly considered within the model and that might explicitly vary as part of the model. Why would you do that? Why not just describe average amount of time they spend in each place and let them flow through? Yeah.
The resources and the distribution of resources is probably something that's relevant to the stakeholder.
Exactly. So this sort of modeling is prized because it can allow us to ask those what-if questions about resources. How many do we need? Of what types do we need them? When do we need them? Not only that, where they should be placed, as we'll see. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we go back to this depiction here, you will notice that these people are moving around. And another feature of this sort of modeling is that in many renditions of this modeling, the people moving around, the time it takes them to reach from A to B is, again, endogenized. What I mean is, it's something which is calculated by the model. It's not pre-specified to the model. How long does it take you, for example, to move around? And because of that, because the model actually takes care of calculating the path and how long it takes, you can actually put in place things that will, for example, change the layout of the system. Have the layout be different and examine what the impact is on the flow of patients, on the flow, how many people can move through the system, how long they have to wait for the system if we were to move, say, the X-ray up to here, or if we were to consolidate elements of this emergency care unit to be right next to each other, or if we were to have registrars located at a slightly different place. How much would that help in terms of the flow of patients? How much would it help in terms of how long it takes, say, a patient to get care? So a model like this endogenizes resources and endogenizes movement paths in space. Let's go see how it does that, okay? Let's go dive down into this model. We've sort of taken a look at elements of it, and you can poke around more, and you can go see more statistics. Whoa, let's get back to that higher level there. You can go if you wanted to and poke around and see information about some of these. But let's go dive down and see the model behind this. Let's go down and see where this logic is captured. And for this, ladies and gentlemen, I will switch back to the wonderful world of Windows. Okay, so here we're going to go into the recording here. So let's go open up this model, and I will go take a look in this main view, and I'm going to full screen it. I will scroll down, and you will see that there are, on this general etched view, there are a set of paths that are delineated. And you'll notice them here with these sort of dotted lines. You'll notice that there are junctions here associated with where two paths cross to indicate that, in fact, you can move from one path to the other. That's a junction between them. So if you're coming up from here and you need to go, for example, down to here, it knows that they are connected through that place. And in fact, there's certain areas here that are connected as well. So basically, in short, it has a spatially explicit set of paths associated with this model. Okay? These paths will allow the system to endogenously to calculate where someone will move to go from A to B. And by extension, how long it will take them to go from A to B. Okay? Now, let's go beyond this depiction here. You'll notice that, for example, if you scroll down here in main, you'll see many of those flowcharts that we saw earlier. Okay? These are flowcharts that depict the progress of a given individual, a given entity here, as they move through the system. Now, this this particular model is health related, as much of my work is. Let me ask you, what other sort of entities might you imagine besides patients? Where else could a model like this be useful? Think outside the sort of patient, doctor, patient, medical care context. What other things might flow through a system and be operated upon by the system? Yeah.
Airport, check-in.
Great. Okay, so you're going through the airport. You walk in. First, you determine, okay, do you have your boarding pass or not? If you don't have your boarding pass, this is a branch here. If you don't have a boarding pass, you'll go to one of those kiosks and get it. Otherwise, or you'll go to the desk. Or if you do have your boarding pass, you may proceed either directly to drop off your baggage or to go into a security area, right? Okay, great. Airports. How about another example? Sorry? Factories, exactly. So think about these as cars flowing through a General Motors plant or a Toyota plant, right? These may be vehicles that are being operated upon by individuals or by robots on that plant. What sort of resources would come into play in that context? What sort of resources, say, in an automobile manufacturing plant? People, robots, yeah, the availability of robots, parts, right? So you've got to put in those lug nuts for the car tires. I'm going to be changing my tires tonight. You got to put in those lug nuts, right? You need the bolts to take the engine down. Engine blocks might be a resource needed at one place in the context of this process. But there may be quality inspectors who are people who are required at another place. So different contexts, different resources, different entities, but they all share this feature of a basic, well-defined process, a set of entities that flow through that process, and a set of resources that are required to allow those entities to proceed step by step by step, particularly at certain stages of that process. So what we're going to see in this lecture next is some of the logic behind these mechanisms, some of the logic associated with these features. And we will, in fact, see in this lecture next, we'll start to see how some of the elements associated with spatial layout are captured, okay? This movement over space around a facility. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to this end to go and call up the palette. And I would like you to go to an area of the palette that perhaps you have never explored before. And that is called the Process Modeling Library. Now, once again, we are struck forcibly by misnomers. Much of what we're doing in this class, basically almost everything we're doing in this class, is about modeling processes out there in the world. But in this case, it's processes operating on entities. So don't get distracted too much by the name. We're modeling processes here. We're modeling sort of hypotheses about how processes work. But if you go to this process modeling library, you will find two types of sort of actors here, agent types and resource types. Notice the distinction. This is a very important distinction. It's very asymmetric. There's a difference in this sort of modeling that's a huge gulf between, on the one hand, the entities, the cars flowing through the process, the patient flowing through the hospital, the visitors flowing through the airport, and the resources. The resources may be an X-ray machine in the airport, a kiosk. They may be robots or what have you, or people, inspectors in the context of a plant. And for patients, they may be doctors and nurses, as well as X-ray machines and rooms and beds and wheelchairs, etc. But there's a big gap between them. even for those mobile resources, those resources with agency, doctors, nurses, other types of clinicians, physicians' assistants, or what have you. So here we have these resource types. But notice, equally importantly, in fact, more centrally for our work going forward, you'll notice that there's a bunch of blocks here. Ladies and gentlemen, we spoke some weeks ago about the building blocks of system dynamics. What are the building blocks of system dynamics? What are the pieces out of which we build a system dynamics model? Stocks and flows. And we can build them up into higher level constructs, things like first order delays, aging chains. But fundamentally, we build them out of stocks and flows. In agent-based modeling, we spoke about a larger vocabulary, and this included things like state charts, including states and transition between states and events and things like functions that we created. But it also includes things like populations and statistics and histograms and those sort of things, which are actually some of which will be in common between techniques. Here, we have quite a vocabulary as well. But here we have very specialized vocabulary. In comparison to agent-based modeling, in agent-based modeling, we had things like a state chart, which it's incredibly flexible, like a stock and flow, incredibly flexible things. Here we have very specialized operators. These operators will operate upon these entities as they flow through: a source, a sink, a delay, a queue, thing that allows people to go one way or the other, these select, things that can split up or combine sort of given entities, so temporarily it's worked on in parallel by two different processes or what have you. And seizing and releasing. We're going to go and take a look at how these are used. And then I'm going to ask you to watch a video which talks about sort of the theory of these operators and how they work, and how they differ from one another. Okay? You'll notice some of these operators, most of these operators are quite involved in kind of the flow. For example, seizing. Anyone remember what seizing is? So if I say I seize that bed, what does that mean? Yeah, I'm allocated it. I'm assigned it. I'm sort of given possession of it for a certain amount of time almost. Releasing will release it. By contrast, I may, for example, be asked to move to a room, for example, and I'll use a move to here for some of those elements. So I can move to it, for example. Okay. You'll notice, however, some of these things are actually just epiphenomenal. They help us keep track of some things. For example, time measure start, time measure end. Resource attach actually associates a resource with an agent. So, for example, you might give them a bed, and from then on, where they move, the bed will move with them. So we're going to have a bunch of these operators. I would like, with you, to build up a little model. What do you think about that? You good with that? Okay, let's fire up, and then I'll ask you to, given that I'm not going to be able to present certain theory of these things, I'm going to ask you to watch this video where you will hear me expound upon them. Okay? So I'd like you to do File, New, Model. Okay? And this is going to be called Discrete Event Simulation 1. Okay? And I'll in my normal way, I'll call it CPT 394, Fall 2015. I try to post these all on the website so you can look at them, peruse them. Okay, so here we have a discrete event simulation, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to put in place a very simplistic version of this. Next time, and as time allows, we may do something rather more interesting. But let's now start with the basics, okay? Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to go to main, And to lower confusion here, I'm going to close various windows here and just have the windows from this particular model drawn up here, okay? Here we go. There we go. Okay, good. Now, I'd like you to go to the Process Modeling Library, and I'd like you to put in place a source, okay? And you can leave its name as source for now. That's fine. And you'll notice that with this operator, you specify what sort of agent should come into the system, okay? So let's go and let's actually create an agent, and let's call it agent type patient, okay? It's a patient. So how did I do that? Well, I just went to main model and did new agent type patient, okay? Great. So let's go back to this, and we're going to tell it now, go create a patient when it flows in here. So we're going to have this be a source of patients, okay? Now, each patient could keep track of information on themselves, how old they are, how severe their conditions are, what have you. You'll notice that if you click on this source and you scroll up, you'll be able to set its assumptions. For example, when are the arrivals occurring? At what rate are they occurring? Is there an inter-arrival time we want to specify, a time between arrivals? Is there a schedule? We'll define a schedule of their arrivals over the time of day. For now, we'll just have a rate of one per hour. Were it only so. Okay, actually, let's do 10 per hour. Okay, 1 every 6 minutes. 10 per hour. Okay, now let's put into place a delay. And you'll notice when I drag this in, it will automatically connect this here. So I'll say workup. Okay, here you're examining this patient, and next I'm going to drag in a sync, which is going to be a place that agents go to. And like the others, this is all going to be on a patient-by-patient basis. So these are operating on agents that are patients. Okay? Now, for the workup, I would like to set it so that we have a delay time that's specified in hours. Okay? Why does it keep on saying seconds for me? Anyone? Yeah, it's the model default time, so should have remembered to do it. I'll get to go back and set the model time to hours. But for the things we've already added, the default time that it's using is seconds. So I'm just going to change it manually here. Okay. So for the workup, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to set a delay time. How long are they in that place? Well, they are there for a certain amount of time. It's a distribution that's called a triangular distribution. It's a probability distribution. And it basically captures a situation where we have some uncertainty about how long things will take. And there's some average time, maybe, which is 1 hour. There's some minimum time, which is half an hour. And then there's some maximum amount of time, which I think here is 1.5 hours. So it's the single most likely time, the so-called mode, is 1 hour. And then there's diminishing likelihood of going up to 1.5 hours and as small as 0.5 hours. We could put in a normal distribution or log normal or an exponential, what have you. But here we have these in hours. People okay with that? Okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Well, okay, so we have this workup here. And what do you think will happen if I run this model right now? Well, I'll give you a hint. It won't be very happy. Why is that? Let's go run it and see what it says. in its own unique language. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, it says it cannot be cast to an agent. That's because the source here, I thought I changed it already, but the source is a patient. I thought I changed that. Oh, I see. It's the new agent up here at the top. I only changed the one at the bottom. You need to change new agent up at the top to be a patient. Okay, and all of these should be patient as well. Okay, so there we go. And let's go run that now, and it will be unhappy in a different way. Okay. It says something that's a little bit puzzling. Tolstoy once said, all happy families are happy in the same basic way, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own unique way. And so it is with error messages on computers, right? There's a lot of variability in how things go wrong. Does anyone want to guess what's going on here? I say this to you because you may encounter this. There's no, okay, it's actually not a shape matter, but there's no space for them, it turns out. They can't fit in here. It was not able to leave here because it's backed up. Notice how many people are getting worked up right now. Single person. And you'll notice what's going on here if you drill down more. So Hal was right. It was something to do with something about the agents not being able to do something. And here, you'll notice there's a capacity of 1 in this workup. Let's change its capacity to 10. What do you think? Capacity to 10? You think that will solve the problem? Well, okay, what will happen initially? Initially, will it be happy? Initially, it will be happy. Look at that. Oh, it's work. Oh. Ever have a program like that? Yeah. You're not alone. So here, this was happy until what happened? What's going on? Like what? What? Can anyone describe what's happening here?
It's going up too fast, and then there's not enough room for people to go.
Yeah, it's filling up fast. And why is it filling up so fast? Put your stock and flow helmet on. Remember, this is a count of people in there. There's inflows and outflows. What's going on here? Why is it filling up like that? Inflow is greater than the outflow. They stay in that on average for an hour. And how many do you have coming in an hour? 6 coming in. Is that right? Did we have? I thought it was 10 per hour. I think so. It's every 6 minutes. So it's quite likely that they may in fact fill up this, right? You've got 10 people coming in, they fill up, and we can make it arbitrarily large. But here, we're basically saying that they're being operated upon at the same time. They're all being worked up. Okay, we could make it maximum capacity. Let's make it maximum capacity. We have a phalanx of nurses that are miles in length. And here we have them simultaneously dealing with these people coming in. And they're just discharging them at this rate. And you'll notice that workup, that it's, the number that are being processed at any one time is jumping around. What do you think its average will be? Go back to your stock and flow reasoning. What do you think its average will be? How long on average do they spend in that? 1 hour. 1 hour on average. Okay. And if we have an average of 10 people arriving per hour, then they spend an hour there. Under what conditions will that number of people in workup just stay the same? If what equals what? Inflow equals outflow. So if you have 10 people per hour leaving and 10 people per hour coming in, it will be staying the same, right? How many people will be in that stock on average at a given time? if we consider this outflow, think of it as a system dynamics model. You have an outflow. Your mean time in the stock is an hour, right? Mean time in the stock is an hour. So we have a stock X, and you have a mean time in the stock tau. So the number of the outflow here is X over tau, right? X over tau. Remember that in the system dynamics? This is a mean time in here. Remember that? Yeah? Okay. So we want this outflow to equal 10. That's the inflow, right? Outflow equals, if this system is staying in balance, outflow equals inflow, right? Tau here is what? What's the average amount of time in that stock? Average amount of time in there? 1 hour equals 10. So the average of X should be what? 10. Yeah. That's why you see it bouncing around. Now, that's an approximation. Remember, models are approximations of the world. They help us reason about the world. That's an approximation. This thing actually is not perfectly exponentially. It's not a perfect analogy because in a system dynamics model, the amount of time you spend in the stock is exponentially distributed. Here it's triangularly distributed. But it gives you a rough sense about how many people should be in that workup at any one time. And it's basically oscillating around 10. It's not a bad description of it. It contains 3, etc. And we could go map that out. But we have other things you want to do. Notice that we've served somewhere around 3 million, 4 million people. Okay. What a fine phalanx of nurses that is. Okay, but ladies and gentlemen, generally we don't have the option of doing that. We don't have the option of just taking people in an arbitrary fashion here. What we instead want to do is we want to take people in as made possible by the availability of a resource. Moreover, we don't have people just arbitrarily many going through workup at the same time. We actually have them waiting before they go into workup, right? Here, however many show up can be worked up. That's why we temporarily set this to be maximum capacity. We don't want that. That's unrealistic. We don't have a phalanx of nurses, right? Okay, so here we're going to go insert another key element, ladies and gentlemen. And this key element will be drawn like the others from this palette. And this key element is a Q. Okay, now, there we go. This is going to be our Q. This is going to be them waiting for the workup. What's the difference here? Well, before they weren't waiting for the workup, they went directly into the workup. They just went directly. However many arrived, the nurses swarmed over them and grabbed them and treated them immediately. Okay? Here, we're going to actually have people wait. And how many people can be worked up at a time will depend on some availability of resources. Okay? So we're going to have a queue. Now, let's go to workup and, well, first let's go to queue, excuse me. Let's play around with queue. Let's set it up first. Okay, for the queue, I would like to choose here a type of agent, which is patient. It's already set there. That's good. That's good. And I would like to put no capacity limit on this queue. They can wait as long as they want. We could have, Mosaic Stadium available. They're waiting for this service. Okay? Now, let's go to workup. So that's great. That's our queue. You'll notice there's a thing like agent location. Where should they be located, etc. We'll come to the issues of layout later. Okay? You'll notice, though, with the queue, there's also this thing here. There's some things. Enable exit on timeout. This is for bulking. This is if people are waiting too long, they can leave. Could you imagine that happen? Has anyone been in the emergency room? You went there. One time I was curling and I fell and I hit my elbow really badly. It hurt like crazy. And I think, I broke my elbow. So I went home and I told my wife, I'm going to go to the emergency room. She said, don't go to the emergency room. They're going to laugh at you. I said, I want to go to the emergency room. I think I broke my elbow. She's an MD. She said, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to look at you. They're going to say, you want us to take you in when we've got all these other folks? Forget about it. We've got all these sick people here and you come in with this elbow? So I said, I want to go do it. So I went to the emergency room. And I went into that little waiting area. If you've been to the RUH emergency, you go to that little waiting area. And I had my computer. I was all right. They make me wait an hour or two, no problem. I'll work on my, 371 lectures or whatever. So I was in there. An hour passed. They triaged me. They looked at me. They said, "What's the matter?" I said, I think I broke my elbow. And they said, "Oh, okay." And they took my health card and so on. And other people, there was some guy who they brought in on a stretcher from a car accident with his head, and he was immobilized in a gurney. There were some other people around who were coughing and sitting uncomfortably close to me, and so on. So I came in and I sat down and started using my computer. There's got to be a plug here somewhere, like I can plug in. There's no plug around. Well, no problem. A couple hours, my battery can handle it. So I was working there. An hour passed. He still hasn't called me. How about 2 hours? Okay. So, man, I'm making progress in those 371 lectures or whatever I was working on. I was ripping through. My battery's getting drained, and they still haven't called me yet. Okay, more people come in. Person with a gash on their face or whatever. Not good. Okay, still there. 3 hours, 4 hours. People are coughing around me. It's getting late. My battery has died. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? my elbow doesn't feel so bad anymore. I'm out of here. So I thought, actually the thought that got me out of there was, I'm going to get sicker being here than I am when I walked in. Even if my elbow is broken, I may get, bronchitis just sitting here around these people. I'm out of this joint. And so I split the joint. And left. And of course I came home. My wife said, I told you. She doesn't like her stubborn husband sometimes. Anyway, so we have the option of exit on timeout, of balking here. We'll get around to that. But husbands have to learn. In the meantime, okay. So let's have this queue. Mind you, it's maximum capacity, and now this workup, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to change it to capacity 1. One person can be dealt with at a single time. How many people are going to be in the queue at a given time, do you think? Okay, we could treat one person per unit time. Okay. So is that Arlen? Yeah. So let's reason through that. Why would Arlen say an increasing number over time will be in the queue? After all, why don't it just be 10 in the queue? Will it just be 10 in the queue? Why will it be an increasing number? Inflow is greater than the outflow. What's the outflow going to be here? 1 an hour. 1 an hour out of this. And so we're going to have 1 an hour going out. Mind you, that's very different from what we had before, where we were treating 10 at a time or whatever. Now we have 1 an hour going out, and how many an hour coming in? Okay, all those broken elbows. All right? Okay, should we simulate this thing? Okay, let's go. And if you think RUH is bad, watch this. Okay, so here we go. The hours are swishing by. How many are in the queue now? 50, 57, 72. Okay, oh, look at those broken elbows. Okay, here we go. 3,000 in the queue. Okay, okay, they're pouring over here to Sphinx now. Okay, we're just ripping through this. We have major numbers here: 46,000, 137,000, 220, 213,000. Okay, we need some balking. What do you think? You want to put in place some balking? Okay, let's do that. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is to go actually hitch up an additional element. An easy way to do this is to copy this connector and paste it, and then we're going to hitch it up to this guy here. I'm pretty sure that's the right connection there. They used to label them, but no luck right now. Okay, and then we'll drag this down here. So, hey, why isn't that? There we go. Make sure it's green on both sides. Green is the color. Okay? Okay. Great. So now we have a situation where we have a possibility of timing out, and we're going to say that this will time out, and the timeout will be based on hours of waiting. Okay? And the timeout will be based on, let's draw it from a uniform distribution. Different people will have different tolerances. Uniform distribution between 0.5 hours, say 0.25 hours, and 2 hours. Make it 5 hours, okay? Some people are willing to wait up to 5 hours. Okay. So how will this change things, do you think? How do you think this will affect things if we have that? So again, this is the port associated with a timeout there, okay? So how do you think having that timeout will affect things? Okay. There should be fewer people in the queue than before, okay? So I like what I'm hearing here. So what we have here is a queue which is staying pretty well in balance. We actually have a situation where we have treated a large number of individuals down here. So far, and I'm a little bit puzzled by this here. So we had, again, enable exit on timeout, and with this timeout, the queue is staying pretty well in balance. It's above the level we saw before, with the original queue, because there we had people being treated in parallel. But we have some people going over with this preemption thing, and then some people going over with, and you'll notice this is firing, but we have some people going over here through this to actually be treated. Okay, you notice we're pretty much constantly busy here, and here we've treated hundreds of thousands of people. You notice that the number that have balked here, you could see it here. It's 10 million so far. 10 million broken elbows. We've only treated 1.2 million people here. Do you see that? That's this number here. Versus we've had this many people balking. Yes, Ansgar. Sure. So what I did here is I'll repeat it. Okay. So I took one of these connectors, I copied it. I just did Control C. I pasted it like this. And then I dragged it to this particular place here. It's the rightmost of the two green ones. And then I prettified it a little bit, but I dragged the other one here till it's green on the exit. And I'm spacing it out a little bit. And I'll run it again. And here we see statistics on how many people have balked versus how many people have gotten treated. I think this other one that was further left, the green, is shown as the 0, which is preemption, I think. In any case, so here we've had far more people balking, but we've treated a fair number of people. Okay, so that was a basic mechanism for sort of queuing, and you can see there's a certain logic to arranging these things. Now let's put in place a more sophisticated mechanism, which will associate resources with this model, okay? So ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to go and I would like you to add in to this system a resource type, okay? And within this context, we're going to, okay, so here's a resource unit, and we'll have it sure be nurses, okay? And we don't need it to do anything, to be located at a particular place. So we've just dragged in a resource. Let's call it nurse, okay? Nurse. There we go. Okay. So here we have now nurses represented in the model. And the nurses will be a resource. Now, like patients, we could keep track of certain information for them. Their level of specialty in certain things or what have you. But right now, we'll just keep them as a nurse. Notice they're just another type of agent here, okay? So even though it said add a resource type, it's just a different type of agent. Okay, let's go to main here to get back to this. And now, let's take the key steps. Let's add a resource pool, okay? And I will say nurses, okay? So how did I do that? I scrolled down here in the palette to this area of resource pool, okay? And I dragged in a resource pool. The unit type of this is going to be nurse. And indeed, up further on, new resource unit will be defined in terms of a nurse. The capacity of this we will currently leave as 1 to indicate there's only one nurse available right now. As Ansgar said, we will subsequently loosen that restriction by allowing multiple resources of this sort to be active at a given time, and we can see the results. So we have nurses here in a resource pool. Okay, do people want me to repeat anything I've done thus far? Anyone? You'll notice that there's all sorts of little bit of items here that will be pointers to later work. For example, where they live, what their speed is, how quickly they move, when their shifts occur or breaks occur in their schedule, and some details about how their capacity can sort of vary over time or what have you. So here we have nurses. Now, ladies and gentlemen, right now we just have this workup thing. We're going to have to expand this. To take advantage of this resource, we're going to need to expand this in a significant way. And I'd like you to watch as I do this. We're going to need to insert a new block here, which is going to be called seize. So here we go. We're going to seize a resource, okay? So I will call it assign nurse, or you could call it allocate nurse. Either would be accurate, okay? Now, the key thing is here it's going to take a bit of time before the nurse is free. After the workup, I would like to bring in a release. So the nurse is done, and I will just I'll say release nurse. Okay. Okay. We're done. We're done with the workup, and the nurse can resume her or his duties. Okay, very good. Assign nurse, once again, what we're going to be doing is we need to make sure that the settings are appropriate, okay? And here we're going to just scroll down. The agent type here will be patients. The agents flowing through here will be patients. But we're going to here, and this is very important, up at the top, this is key, for assign nurse, we are going to seize here units of the same pool, in which pool? Resources. Sorry, the resource pool of nurses. So I chose units of the same pool, and which one? Nurses. Okay, and the number of units that will be seized is just a single one. In the workup and release nurse area, I am going to release all seized resources, and we don't have to worry about moving us back to our location. Okay? Are people okay with that? Who wants me to show any further thing that I've done? So how do you think this will affect what we've done? If we have to get a nurse assigned and wait for it otherwise, how do you think that will affect things? You can only have one workup at the same time. So it's not really changing the situation much, actually, in terms of some of the basic statistics. And if time allows here, we may explore that, but time is a-ticking, so I want to check that. Now let's change the nurses to have a capacity of let's say 10. Let's say 5 nurses. 5 nurses. How do you think this will affect things if we have 5 nurses? How do you think it will affect what fraction of people actually get treated as opposed to bulking? Anyone? Yeah.
The workup can still only take 1 person per hour, right? So it shouldn't change anything.
Okay, yeah. So right now, it's still limited by this workup. Now that we have this, we're going to increase it to maximum capacity here. We were still limiting it to 1 person per hour, but we're going to change the workup since it's kind of controlled now by how many nurses you have. We're going to say, look, however it can be handled by the nurses, that's how many we can have. So workup, we'll now have a maximum capacity as the constraint. Not 1, not limited to 1, but maximum capacity for workup. How do you think that will affect things? How many do you think will be in service now? Well, typically it's 5 or 4. You see that? The nurses are 99% of the time being used. Their utilization is 99%. 99% of the time they are busy. You'll notice now we're treating about half the total people. The total number of people that have come in is this 610,000, and of those we treated 305,000. Not bad. Not bad. What if we increase the number of nurses to 10? What do you think would happen then? 10 nurses, based on our reasoning before. Do you think we'll be able to treat most people? Why? Yeah, 10 people on average per hour. So here we have, there's been 596,000 people that came in. 593 of them have been treated. Notice the nurse capacity is still 99% duty cycle. 99% of the time they're still busy. What if we increase the number of nurses from 10 to 20? How much do you think that would help? What do you think will happen now? You think we'll be treating everyone? Well, yeah. I mean, of these ones that have left the whole system, all of them have come through here. The utilization of nurses, by contrast, is only about 50%. You know, here we have 7 nurses busy right now. Sometimes it goes 8, sometimes it goes over 10. But really, that extra capacity really hasn't bought us. It bought us a little bit more, but now we're, you know, a lot of the time these nurses are actually not busy anymore, right? They're not busy. Now, this is just part of the picture. Part of the picture. We could, by contrast, for example, take a look. We've been looking at sort of capacity utilization. What fraction of the time of the nurse is busy? We've been looking at how long the queue is, and those are important things. Another thing you could do is for example, look at the time that it took someone to go through the system, how long they've been in the system. And this time measure start and time measure stop could be used, for example, to measure the end-to-end time of a given person, to allow you to sort of quantify how long it is that someone's been in the system. So, for example, here we can pull in a time measure start here and put it in between this source in the queue. And then we could put in place a time measure end here. Where would we put that? Let's think about that. Where would we put that? Well, I would argue that you want to distinguish between the people who balk, you know, the one with the elbow that hurts, versus those that stick. So what we're going to do here, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to put one along this path. Hey, come on. This path here, and then we'll put another one along this path, this upper path, to capture those who are balking. So time measure end here. Okay, hey, there we go. Okay, good. Okay, and then let's, hey, oh man, what's going on here? Okay, there's something a little bit funky here. Okay, there we go. Great. So by capturing this needs to be bumped up a bit. There we go. Time measure end 1. So this should really be called time measure end for balking, not talking. And time measure end for treated. Okay? And using that sort of lens, we could then go and run this model. Okay. Sorry, I need to specify for those. I forgot. Time measure end, you need to indicate which is the starting point that you wanted to record it from. So apologies. With these guys, time measure end specifically, when you're selecting them, you need to go down and select the time measure start blocks that they count from which they count. Okay. What are they counting from? And having done that, we should be able to now record sort of the amount of time that it's taken from one place to another. And in fact, if you go and you click on them, what you'll find is, for example, people from here to here, they are sort of experiencing a maximum time of something like of sort of 1.68 hours, a mean time associated with about 1 hour. But this is with that many nurses. This is with 20 nurses. If we only had 5 nurses, for example, do you think that time will be higher or lower? Will they be in that time for a longer time or a lower time? Anyone? Longer. Yeah. So here, the mean time waiting is 23.5 hours. Long after my battery is run out. long after I may have gotten bronchitis. By contrast, those who are bulking, their time before they leave is about 1.5 hours. Okay, for these ones here. How do we do that? We did it with time measure end, and that time measure end we indicated from what starting point we wanted to measure it, and then we have these statistics. There are some people who had 27.18, and then some lucky folks who got through in less than an hour. How do you think that happened? Very beginning, very start, when people were just starting to come in. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we've taken a look at aspects of discrete event modeling. We've seen that there are these operators we use. So we have with discrete event modeling a set of entities that flow through a system and are operated upon by processes. We have a well-defined process, which is mapped out by a series of operators by which they go through and are operated upon. And critically, particular operators will often depend, ladies and gentlemen, on particular resources that need to be available. In this case, it was a very simple resource, but we could have had multiple resources. For example, not just nurses, but rooms. And we could have made it assign a nurse and then also assign a room. And for either one, if it weren't available, we'd block. And we see that using this, we can ask questions about resource availability and its impact on flow. We can ask about how long people spend in queues, how big the queues get, and examine essentially the throughput of this system, how quickly it can process things in terms of these entities. I will ask you to watch a video, and next time we will talk a little bit about how this maps onto visual layout of a facility and moving people around according to location, according to paths, and how you can change that layout and see the effects that ripple through in terms of the flow of patients. Okay? Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you for your patience with both a P-A-T-I-E-N-T-S and P-A-T-I-I-E-N-C-E. And I will be holding office hours as I am wont in 386 if anyone would like to come, and I will see you on Thursday. Oh, we have pop quizzes here. The TA is trying to get. I have to apologize. I've been pushing on the TA for problem set 1 and trying to finish it by today. He was trying to finish it over the weekend. Okay, is Bo here? Yeah, Bo. And then TAD 638 and Josh Wilson. Josh? No, Josh. And Usama Sheikh? No? Okay.